Coffee with Colm, and thank you for joining me. We live in strange times. It's just the start of the coronavirus shutdown here in Ireland. The schools were effectively shut down. All schools and colleges were shut down from 6 p.m. last Thursday, and that effectively put 120 Carambola personnel, yours truly included, on enforced leave for the next number of weeks. No idea how long it's going to last. They're talking about 2 weeks, then there's a week where we're back to school, and then there's the 2-week Easter break. For what it's worth, I think the sentiment is that we expect that it will in fact remain closed for the next 5 weeks. So it's challenging for all of us. So I thought this particular Coffee with Colm I might address the failure of our first business many years ago, and the perfect storm that came that effectively killed our business. The reason I want to share that is because there's a lot of fear and panic out there amongst business owners, employees obviously, but amongst business owners too, that their businesses may not survive coronavirus. And it's probable that some businesses will not survive the coronavirus shock. But let me paint a picture for you that isn't perhaps all doom and gloom. We lost our business back in the early 2000s because of a perfect storm of events that came together. First thing that happened was there was a change in customer eating habits, and people went to different styles of cafe to ours. We had a Bewley's Cafe franchise at the time in Limerick, and people began to vote with their feet and go elsewhere for more modern fare, let's say, than Bewley's was known to offer at the time. So that was the first problem. So our business began a slow decline. Second thing that happened was foot and mouth disease. Now this is where there's a parallel perhaps between then and now. Foot and mouth disease, however, was a bovine disease, which basically meant that only the animal population was at risk. That said, the government asked people not to travel into the cities from the hinterlands, from the agricultural land, in an attempt to minimise the spread of the virus, and that's what happened. For about 6 months, people basically stayed away from the cities, and our business had already gone into slow decline, literally dropped by 20% overnight because of a government directive. And perhaps that's where you are today. Perhaps like we've gone into 100% decline today because of a government directive, but it's beyond our control. And perhaps your business too is hurting today because of coronavirus, which is entirely beyond your control, and perhaps because of a government directive. So you've got to figure out the difference between stuff you can do something about and stuff that you can't just do anything about. The third thing that happened in our perfect storm was just as foot and mouth disease was lifting, 9/11 struck. And when 9/11 struck, the Americans never flew back into Shannon. They stopped flying at that time, never flew back into Shannon. And again, the tourism industry is hurting at this moment in time because of the lack of travel. We had something similar back then, and our business stayed flat. It had dropped 20% because of foot and mouth disease and then stayed flat. And the fourth thing that happened was, again, entirely beyond our control, was a rent hike. This was back in the heady Celtic Tiger days, and greed was just rampant, and so landlords hiked up their rents to ridiculous levels, and our rent on our coffee shop, our already struggling coffee shop in Ireland's third city, went up to €1,000 per day. €1,000 per day selling cups of coffee and bacon, egg and sausage that nobody wanted anymore. Very painful time. And you put all those four elements together. Had any one of those four elements come along on its own, we perhaps mightn't be having this conversation, because perhaps that business might have survived. But it was a combination, a perfect storm of all of those events happening consecutively over a handful of short years. Anyway, all of this to say that if you're feeling fearful at this moment in time and nervous about the future and nervous about the survival of your business, I get that, 100% get that. I am that soldier. I've been there, done that, have the t-shirt. What's important, I think, are the lessons that I can share with you as a result of our first business failing, and how I'm now perceiving where we are with coronavirus. So let's look at why I'm suggesting you remain somewhat positive in these very strange and somewhat difficult times. If we take the four things that happened in our perfect storm, let's look at them in terms of where we are today. Firstly, I'm assuming that before Corona hit, your business wasn't on a downward trajectory as ours was back in the day. So that's the first thing. That's a positive in your favour. Second thing is, coronavirus is a pandemic. It's hit everybody in the world, where back in the day, foot and mouth disease hit, Ireland and the UK, and it was quite a localised challenge. And therefore the supports available and the understanding of everybody else wasn't necessarily there as it is today. For coronavirus, there are an amazing amount of supports will be unveiled over time from revenue and from the banks to help you and I survive. If your business is viable already, well then everybody is going to get behind you to see how they can make it work for you when the veil is lifted again. And that's a really positive place to be. Everybody understands. Everybody's in the same boat together. Suppliers will be somewhat understanding of the fact that maybe you can't pay on time. The bank's the same. Revenue the same. Your employees will understand that this isn't your fault. It's not something stupid that you did that has put them out of work for a period of time. So it's a very different dynamic just now, and you need to understand that and accept that, and there's somewhat of a positive in that, dare I say it, in that there's full and proper understanding of what's going on, and it's beyond your control. Third thing is, and I can't say this with 100% certainty, but the likelihood of a 9/11, coming on the back of this when this veil begins to lift, the likelihood is very slim. So let's hope that in this period, whatever length this period is going to be, let's hope when it finishes and we can begin the recovery process much more quickly than we were able to back in the day. And then fourthly, I'm assuming because we're all in this together, landlords are going to respect the human population. They're going to respect their fellow humans and not hike up the rents like happened through pure greed back in the early 2000s here in Ireland. So, if you look at the perfect storm that put us out of business, there were 4 elements. Of those 4 elements today, there's only one displaying itself at this moment in time. That is coronavirus, albeit a far more deadly virus in human terms than foot and mouth disease ever was. So the 4 lessons that I took from my first business failing, and I'd like to share out there for you to consider during these difficult times. Number 1, our business failed, we did not fail. Our business failed, we did not fail. Number 2, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. This will come to an end. We will be looking back at this at a point in the future. Number 3, so long as you stay safe, you will survive. So long as you stay safe and healthy, you will survive. As somebody said, if your problems are only financial, you don't have problems. If your problems are only financial at this time, you don't have problems relative to some others out there who are suffering terribly. And number 4, when you and I come out the far side of this, and we will never be the same again. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. When you and I come out the far side of this, and we will never be the same again. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then the 5th one, which didn't apply back in the day, but the 5th one that I believe applies today, is when we come out the far side of this, the world will never be the same again. And that also is not necessarily a bad thing. So look, in conclusion, in this very unusual set of circumstances, the most important advice I can suggest is stay safe out there. Mind yourself, mind your loved ones, be kind to others, be kind to yourself, and then stay in touch. Stay in touch here, stay in touch with whatever communities that you are involved with. Stay in touch with them. Look and seek for support where you need it and offer support where you can. And then, God willing, in a handful of weeks we'll be back together on track for recovery. And thank you for joining me for this week's Coffee with Colm in very unusual circumstances. I hope and trust as ever you got something from it. Please consider what's been shared here today and apply it into your thinking for this next week. And then very importantly, come back next week and we'll share another coffee together and we'll ruminate on some other aspect of life and business in very strange times. Meantime, get some great coffee and get some fresh air. You are allowed out. Just stay away from people. You are allowed out. I usually say if you spend too much time alone, go meet some people. I'm not going to do that this week, although I do recommend you go meet some people online. Get involved with some virtual network somewhere and stay in touch. One advantage that's coming out of this is you get to spend some time alone and reflect on who you are and where you're headed. And then when the time is right, and only when the time is right, get your head back in the game, get organised for the week ahead, get stuck in a very different way. Make next week count in some shape or form for you. And I'll see you here this time next week for another Coffee with Colm. Slán. I still love great coffee. Talk to you soon. Stay safe out there. See you next week.